So we're moving on now to our first panel. Well, the International Air Transport Association, IATA, initiated an industry task force to develop recommendations to improve global flight tracking, which presented its conclusions to ICAO, which is due to issue formal guidelines on aircraft tracking shortly. All of this, of course, following the MH370 incident. So we're going to look in a bit more detail into the subject of tracking. So, ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome to the stage, first of all, Mohammed Eturki, the Executive Director, Group Safety and Quality for FlyNas. Then Captain Elias Sadek, the Vice President, Safety and Quality for Egypt Air Holding Company. Hussein Dabbas, the Regional Vice President, Africa and the Middle East for IATA. And Chamsou Deen Andjorin, the Director for Aviation Safety for Africa and the Middle East for Boeing. Gentlemen, welcome to the stage. So, what I want to do is kind of remind ourselves of the event that led to the call for this improvement in global tracking. A Malaysian-led multi-international investigation team has just published the facts that it knows about Malaysia Airlines flight MH370, the scheduled Kuala Lumpur-Beijing flight that disappeared without trace on the 8th of March 2014. As yet, there are no conclusions about where it is or why it diverted from its flight plan. Now, the 587-page report released by the Minister of Transport summarises what is known about the missing Boeing 777-200 and its maintenance history. It also describes the flight path that it followed while it was in radar range and what its track is likely to have been based on satellite communications beyond radar surveillance until the time at which it would have run out of fuel. Now, if there are any reliable clues as to why the aircraft took the trajectory it did, they're to be found between the time the crew checked in for duty at 22:50 local time and the time that the aircraft could no longer be observed on radar at 02:22 local time the next day. The deduction that the aircraft then turned south unseen is based on Inmarsat analysis of variations in satellite handshakes that were with the aircraft, and that's the only information that's available. But these are few, and the accuracy of any deductions drawn from them is not guaranteed. So from the sparse information that's available, it seems probable that the search is being conducted in the best area, but there are no certainties. So unless the aircraft wreckage and its recorders are found, then the causes of this extraordinary event can remain unknown. And that's what prompted the call for tracking. How can it be, in this day and age when satellites can allegedly tell us what newspaper we're actually looking at in the street, that we not know where this aeroplane is? So if I can start, Hussein, with you from IATA, what are the recommendations that IATA has made in this aircraft tracking task force? Where is it and how far are we going?
Thank you. Is it working? Yes, I assume so. First of all, I'd like to, before I start, I really want to congratulate the United Arab Emirates for attaining the top global safety position for aviation. I think this is a great accomplishment for the United Arab Emirates and wish them the best of luck to continue in this top position for years to come. Soon after the incident of MH370, IATA has basically brought together stakeholders from different parts of the globe, aircraft manufacturers, airlines, pilots, of course ICAO and other stakeholders, to really basically sit together and review what happened and what issues needs to be identified in the near term and to find out how we can prevent this from happening ever again. Of course, now throughout the summer and fall of 2014, the task force really reviewed today's technologies, procedures, as well as best practice in terms of aircraft tracking. And what it found that most airlines do track their airplanes wherever they're flying in different manners. Most, of course, are using the traffic surveillance services and so on. Now, this is not always available across the globe. So that's where sometimes you have a kind of a blank area. However, I think there is a need to come up with new ideas, new procedures, but let's remember that there is not one size fits all. So there has to be different ways of how to tackle this. Now, of course, ICAO and IATA and the stakeholders came up with a lot of recommendations. And basically, what it says is that the technology is here, the technology is available, it's a matter of using it. It also came up that there should not be a specific rules because the technology is continuously evolving and improving. And what is required is to keep an open mind on anything that is happening and being produced to start using it. Now, of course, we also encourage member states to really use the ANSPs in a more efficient manner to make sure that the aircraft is continuously monitored throughout its flying period.
Okay, so can I sort of pick up on that? Are you surprised that 1 year down the line, we still don't know anything? I made the point about satellites can see where we are reading a newspaper. Are you surprised that we haven't?
Actually, I think everybody is surprised. I mean, they keep telling us you're basically monitored as a person wherever you're going through your mobile phone, yet here we go, look at the 777 airplane, the flying disappears and nobody finds it, and there's no trace of it, there's not a single idea of where this actually has crashed, if it did crash, because it's still an open question. I mean, as you know, just recently it was announced that this is an accident, and to finalize and close this chapter after basically 1 year. It happened on March 8th, if my memory serves me right. So it's really surprising. I think everybody around the world is still surprised of how can this airplane simply disappear and nobody can find a trace of it.
Okay, if I go, Elias, if I can go on to you, I mean, is it quick enough? Are we hanging around?
Personally, I think it's too little, too late. 1 year passed, nobody's doing anything. I think the industry has to move, ICAO, IATA, everybody involved. You know, it's always said that airlines should compete in everything except in the matter of safety. And this is a safety issue. I think that nobody's doing, there is no pressure. And I think if another aircraft would go missing, you know, in the near future, it will be inexcusable to everybody involved.
But indeed, we had that, didn't we, when the AirAsia flight disappeared. And Mohammed, I mean, your view on that? I mean, did you think it was going to be another disappearing aeroplane?
Yeah, to be quite honest, I mean, historically, recovering aircraft and data has proven to be a challenging role, really, for the industry. And after the Air France 447 and the MH370, the world has woken up to the need for addressing this issue at the global level. Aircraft tracking should be considered, and now it is being considered as at the global level, because as you know, the aircraft as it flies, it normally crosses several regional barriers, and unless we achieve the continuity in the aircraft tracking systems, we would never be able to actually resolve this issue. Now, the ICAO, I believe they have made several moves through their meetings. They have conducted the first meetings last year, in May last year, and they established the ad hoc working group and the ATTF task force. They've come up with recommendations, and I believe these documents they've come up with, they are addressing the way forward to resolve these issues. This is becoming now, you know, part of the global aviation community unity towards resolving the aircraft tracking issue. And I think maybe little has been done so far, but the plan is to, you know, at a very, you know, near future, to make sure that we have this issue under control.
Okay, but how much of this is emotional? How much is this that we've got to get an answer now? I mean, we're saying, you're saying, Elias, that, it should have been done. We're too slow. Yeah. You're saying we're moving on with it, and I think Hussein, you were saying the same. But isn't it just an emotional reaction that, people have lost their lives? Well, we should have done something. We've got to do it now. Are we better taking our time and doing it properly, or is it, as you said, Hussein, it's not a one-time solution? If this question had been raised 2 years ago, would we be in a different place?
Yeah. You see, at the moment, there are systems in place. I mean, most of many of the regions, they use the air traffic service surveillance systems. And these systems normally, they have some disadvantages. They don't have a global coverage. They don't have the continuity of global coverage across the world. And they also use some other equipment attached to the aircraft flying, like transponders. And there are issues with the transponders as well. These transponders can be switched off. And to do all these changes, either to the aircraft or to the ground equipment, there are design features that have to be considered, and all risk assessment of the design concept of the equipment fitted to the aircraft. The transponders, they have to come up with a new design. All these things will take time. And I think the global aviation community are working towards, having a permanent solution by assigning and involving the experts from all over the world in the industry, in the aviation industry. Now we have the regulators, their navigation service providers, the operators, all are working together to try and achieve a permanent solution to aircraft tracking systems. It's not something that you can come up overnight. You can't come up with it overnight.
I think some of the technologists say that it's actually possible already. And Chamsou, if we go to you at Boeing, and what's Boeing's feeling about this regarding tracking? Is it something the company supports, or actually is it another challenge? Is it going to be more weight to the aircraft? Is it another thing that could go wrong? How do you see it from the manufacturer's role?
Thank you, Alan, for giving me the opportunity to talk about Boeing's position about this issue. I think for not the first time, but one of the opportunities that industry and government came together and address an issue that is global. It's not particular to a manufacturer, it's not particular to an industry, it's a global issue and it's being addressed globally. So it's very important that we mention this working together at the highest and global level between government and industry to address this issue. And of course, Boeing, having been part of the industry task force led by IATA, and we support this global tracking, and we support collaborative solutions.
And are you working on anything? I mean, or is it a case of, Boeing would go, yeah, we welcome somebody coming up with tracking, whoever that somebody may be. Is Boeing actually physically involved in pushing ahead to get this done?
There is no, as I said, it's not a specific manufacturer issue. So we globally need to agree on what to do in short term and long term. And then technology will be, the technology exists today. It's just the way the operator use them. So Boeing will certainly working with the industry and identify the technology that are applicable today and tomorrow, and that is fittable on new airplanes as well as retrofit airplanes in existing airplanes. So it's again, it's an industry working together.
Okay, I'll come back on to a couple of things you said there in a moment if I can. The states, it's the state's responsibility because it's the state that picks up the costs, I guess, when something goes wrong. And Jeff mentioned in his piece that some of the challenges that we face in the Middle East here are the number of disparate states that airlines operate, have to cross relatively small areas and so on. Who takes responsibility? Is it just unfortunate for people like Australia, who may have a huge amount of ocean, or Cameroon, for example, who picks up a lot that's happening across the southern Atlantic, as we saw with the Air France incident? Where does the responsibility pick up? Won't that bankrupt a state if there's a major problem? And therefore, is it up to that state to invest in this technology? Hussein, what do you think? I mean, the impact for a country.
I believe it's basically a unified responsibility. I don't think it is the airlines or manufacturers or the ANSPs or the governments. It's everybody, all the above. It's after all, airplanes carry passengers from different nationalities, and the airlines are operating under strict rules and regulations that are imposed by the regulators, rightly so. So it is a joint responsibility. It cannot be just for one. Of course, when, God forbid, an accident happens, the government and the regulators jump in to start investigating together with the aircraft manufacturers and the airlines. But at the end of the day, the regulator is the party that is responsible for making sure that the aviation industry operates in a safe and secure manner. And this is something that is accepted worldwide. That's why there is ICAO, and that's why all the rules and regulations and the standards are set by the governments for airlines and all the value chain to be following it up that way. But again, let's remember the safest mode of transportation. Last year, there was 3.3 billion passengers traveling on airplanes. And yes, one death is one too many, but if we look at the 641 fatalities, this is really a very, very small percentage. We're talking about 12 fatal accidents in aircraft from 38 million flights that took place last year. So it's still really a very safe industry, and we should be very proud of it. But again, one accident, as I say, is one too many, which we should avoid.
And I think we all agree with that, but that goes back to that point of, is it an emotional response? We know it's rare. The chances of a disappearing aircraft are so remote that it doesn't happen. I mean, I think we said earlier 19 possibly throughout history that have disappeared. Is it fair that the pressure should be on the airlines to have to invest? There's no doubt that the bill eventually will come back to the airlines because everything does. So is it fair for an airline to have to pay for something that may not happen very often? And we're still the safest in the world anyway. So, Elias, what do you think?
Well, I think that if there is no pressure, the money will find another venue to be spent. There must be a pressure. And I think it's a dollar well spent, because we owe it to our passengers. We owe it to the families. And as Mohammed was speaking before we entered, that if we recover the aircraft early enough because of a good and efficient tracking system, you might be able to save lives. Now, how much of a price could you put corresponding to a life? So I don't think it's emotional. I think it is very intelligent, very intelligent decision, and it should be done. I think so.
So you would push for us?
I would push. I would
to
push very much.
It,
and it has to be regulated, because airlines will never do it. I'm speaking about now, from a personal view.
Yeah.
I'm not representing anybody here. But I say that if it's not regulated, it will never. It will be maybe in the next 50 years that airlines will catch on it. But it has to be regulated. It has to be mandatory. And it could be a part of IOSA maybe, as an IATA member. I don't know, I'm just brainstorming here, that it has to be some kind of mandatory to be a part of the world-class community of aviation.
Okay, Mohammed, you're involved with an airline. You're with an airline that's watching costs. Do you think that it's worth the money that your airline would be spending on being tracked, because you probably would be anyway on the routes that you're taking? So is it
Yes, indeed. I think so. I mean, like Captain Elias saying, I mean, the lives of our passengers and humans, even one single life is worth, you know, the investment. I mean, the fact that we spend a lot of money on putting the right system in place to make sure that we have basic tracking set up. It's actually, this is whatever money we put in, it's offset by the efficiency of the search and rescue and the alertness. You know that something is going to happen to the aircraft, and the search and rescue will become much easier, so you'll be able to, maybe you might be able to save some lives, you might be able you will get to the aircraft at the right time. And there are situations where the aircraft might just ditch in the water where you can't see it, and ditching, people can still survive. So I think, yes, I think it's worth investing for the solution. Perhaps that the committees formed by ICAO will come up with a solution that would be cost effective for the global community, global aviation community, which we encourage, because you know, at the end of the day, this has to happen. Maybe we'll have the basic tracking information that can be participated or can be participated as a compulsory by everyone, by all operators. And the enhanced tracking, more information can be pushed to maybe operators who can afford to pay more. But yes, I think and the global aviation community expertise are now investing free of charge. ICAO members and aviation authorities, experts around the world, they are participating free of charge in trying to find solutions now for the operators and for the global aviation community. So I think, yes, I think it's very worth it to go for it.
And if we look at the cost of an accident, I mean, it's often said, isn't it? It's how expensive.
Too much.
It is. I mean, what sort of cost is it? What does it do to an airline if you do have an incident like this? And will Malaysians survive? Throw it open.
Yeah, actually, I mean, I think cost should not be an issue here. Definitely you can take the olive from the salad and save $50,000 or cancel the salad altogether. But when it comes to the safety and security, there should not be any kind of questions about it. I mean, we keep telling airlines there is definitely a high cost of maintenance and safety and security, but wait till you have an accident and then see how big that cost is. So I don't believe airlines should really consider the cost factor when it comes to the safety and security of their passengers and aircraft. And yes, as mentioned, probably it should become a regulation where airplanes need to have these kind of equipments to maintain the contact with the ANSPs, regardless of the costs involved. Airlines should not look at this as a cost factor, should look at it as part of their safety and security of the operation altogether.
Yeah, I'd like to say that also it's not only the cost of the accident, but also there is another cost incurred that looking for that aircraft. Look at Air France 447. They kept looking for it for over 2 years, if memory serves me right. Look at who could take such a tremendous task to be done. Yeah. Especially that airlines fly all over the world, you know, going somewhere in the ocean, beside another continent. Some countries can't do that, just can't afford that. You know, the bill is prohibitive.
And does it go to the airline? I mean, in the Air France?
At the end, it will be the airline. Maybe the state will pitch in if it is a flag carrier or a state-owned airline. But at the end, it will be the airline. So the bill is prohibitive, just among this bill to be paid to bring that aircraft back and recover it.
Okay, now this is going to be a difficult question because this is the kind of thing that makes me unpopular when I ask these types of questions. Loss of lives are tragic. Would the same thing, the same reaction, the same time it's taken to look at things have happened if that was a US carrier with US passengers rather than a Malaysian carrier with Chinese passengers? Is there a difference in the value of life as we look at it as an industry?
Well, it shouldn't be, but shamefully, I have to say, that there is a difference in life when the American, for instance, I'm saying this as an example, is over 10 million. I just heard that. But another person, maybe from China, it will be less. So it's not equal. We are living in a very unjust world.
Any other comments on?
Well, actually, I mean, when it comes to the liability, the United States removed the liability. I mean, basically, anybody can sue the airline for unlimited amount of money when it comes to the loss. But again, let's remember that many airlines folded because they had a crash. And basically, whether it was Swiss or TWA or Pan Am, these are clear and recent examples of airlines who basically folded because they could not handle the accident or the aftermath of the accident. So it's really something that airlines need to keep in the back of their mind, that every possible action to make this operation safe is something that should be first and foremost.
Can I ask, I think we've got microphones available. I think if there are any people in the audience who actually want to raise a point, can you wave your hands and we'll find whoever's got the microphones to pick you up. Oh, there is somebody already at the back there if the microphones are available. If you could keep your hand up there for me, please, so we can. Thank you. Would you mind saying who you are and where you're from as well, just to put it into context, just in case you were Malaysian and you had a point to make it?
Sure. Good morning, Cengiz Turkoğlu from City University London. I also represent the IFA, International Federation of Airworthiness, but perhaps this is just a personal view. While I agree with all the comments made, the cost of the accident, and not only the direct but indirect cost, but equally we are living in this age that we're all already ultra safe, as already mentioned. Do you also think that the decision that we should spend money at the expense of spending less money on runway safety, loss of control accidents, and the other more frequent accidents, rather than what we can actually classify as black swans? Thank you.
That's a good point, isn't it? I mean, we've got enough to focus on. There's only a limited pot of money we could ever get hold of. So is this the wise use of money? Or should we be focusing, spending more money on runway incursions and so on? Let's go down the line and here. We start off with...
Managing safety needs to be viewed as a global, I mean, as a whole, as a higher, at a higher view. There are many causes for unsafe situation, and we have limited resources. So obviously, sound management and governance principles would recommend that we spend money on the most frequent and most the causes that have most impact on fatalities, as, for instance, than on remote situation. But this is a management principle, and I think that's what the industry has done in the past. We have spent a lot of resources on runway safety, on loss of control, on CFIT, because they were identified, and they still identified, as the major accident causes. So, and efforts continue on that. That said, when there is a situation, an emerging risk, we still need to focus on that and identify what needs to be done to at least attenuate or manage that risk to an acceptable level. And I think that's what is what's being done now regarding this global tracking issue. And the industry is coming together, identifying what can be done in short term, in long term, and make a recommendation that makes sense. it's not like, it's not only emotional. I think the industry has proved to be very considerate on addressing this issue and finding the best approach. And we get, I'm sure that working together, we will get a solution that is satisfactory.
Hussein, your view.
Yes, actually, IATA establishes a lot of committees and task forces to look after and look at all aspects of the aviation, whether in the air or on the ground. And yes, there are a lot of incidents and accidents taking place on the ground at the airport, and that's why the task force is basically looking at ways to preventing and reducing these incidents. Again, are we talking about a pot of money? How much should we give to the ANSPs or to the ground handlers or to the airport? I think this should not be the topic. I think airlines and governments need to spend as much money to make this industry as safe as possible. Of course, can you prevent accidents 100%? No, you can't, but you have to do whatever possible to do so. That's why, for example, IATA has the IOSA project, has the ISEGO project, has the task force to look after all issues. But then it comes to the government to really regulate and in some cases prohibit airlines from flying to or even over their territory if they find that airline not safe to operate. And we can see that in the European Union, where they have what is called a blacklist of airlines that are not allowed to even overfly European countries. Airports are also designated as dangerous airports, and this is kind of distributed to the entire industry, which gives basically put that airport on the wall of shame that is not a safely run airport. So I don't think we should keep on looking at the money factor. If you don't have the money to operate a safe airport, then you shouldn't be having an airport operating in the first place. And the same applies to airlines and ANSPs and so on. So there is a lot of challenge. It is a very difficult industry. It's a very expensive industry. That's why last year, with over $750 billion of revenues that the airlines made, they only made $18 billion in profit, which is less than 0.02% of the revenue. So it is an expensive industry. It's a very highly capital intensive industry. So there is a need to put pressure on the regulators, on the governments, to make sure that this industry remains safe and secure for our passengers.
As it was said, there are steps to reduce, for instance, runway incursions, loss of control in flight. There has been steps, but we have to start somewhere. And if we put a tag, a price on it, when will we start? I think it's high time to start right now. And it shouldn't be connected to money. It is an expensive industry. Once you're in, you have to pay your tab. That's my opinion.
Okay, I think I personally think that we're looking at, well, although both items are safety-related items, but we're looking at different issues here, because the aircraft tracking is really, as we said earlier, it has a lot of elements that has to be shared globally, rather than, some countries, with regards to the development of runways and safeties on the ground, the countries have different capabilities in developing such, standards within their states. But the aircraft tracking is more of a global issue that requires, a global community alliance to resolve this issue. And the impact of not being able to track an aircraft or not being able to find the position of missing an aircraft, the financial impact would be a lot higher than, I think, would be a lot higher than, the issue with the ground safety issues on the ground.
Okay, so are we then saying, in response to that question, actually we're probably looking at two completely different things. One is the points that are within our control, and how bad airport, good handling ban, or the airport or the regulatory authority has a responsibility to do. And then there's the planet, the bits we can see and the bits we can't see. And that cost should be borne globally, a United Nations fund that would cover that. And if that money was therefore available, would that be done without impacting the passenger at the end of the day? Because Hussein, as you quite rightly say, you can get more money from just investing in a hamburger stall than you can from investing in an airline. Yeah. And if the airlines are not making money, if they've got to pay extra, then presumably fares will rise and the passenger pays inevitably in the end. So is it down to the passengers or is it separate? So I think that might have answered that question. There's another one over here, please, with the microphone. Thank you.
Hello. Okay, thank you. My name is Mohammed. I'm an aviation psychologist and human factor in charge at Air Blue in Pakistan. I also fly Airbus 320. I just want to ask the panelists, because it's very interesting that we are talking about the cost. But do we start to think about a possibility where the expenses we incur on safety and we incur on aviation security probably have to be reviewed? Because I have started to feel, especially in our country there, in these regions, that there's a bigger link which is now coming as we're talking today, which was related probably to aviation security, and it is now coming to aviation safety. They're linking together. But still the stakeholders or the in charges of these two departments in the industry, they apparently do not sit together in the way which probably would be required in the future. And how can we benefit from the cost by combining the cost from both the efforts which can come from there? Thank you. And sorry, when it comes to aviation security, then the lower level of ground staff's training and their awareness and their contribution towards aviation safety is also probably part of consideration. Thank you so much.
Okay, what do you want to pick up on that? Security, is it security or is it safety? Is it our problem? Should we be talking to the people that are getting the money on the security side rather than the safety side?
I think both are interrelated. I mean, both security and safety come into one bundle if we are talking about the operation of the aviation, and that's why you always hear safety and security, and that means the entire process. Definitely, again, the cost should not be a factor of it, and we have seen how things have changed and evolved throughout the years, and whether in making the airline industry safer, which it has become much safer than what it used to be several decades ago, and it's continue to improve, even though the volume, the numbers are much bigger than what they used to be. I mean, again, last year we celebrated 100 years of civil aviation, when it started with one passenger, one airline, and one route, and now we're talking about 3.3 billion passengers taking to the sky on 100,000 flights a day. This definitely requires a lot of work from all the apparatuses to make sure that it continues to be a safe and secure industry. And that means from the minute the passenger steps into the airport until he steps out of the airport. So it's a continuous process that needs to be worked on regardless of the cost. And I think airlines and the airports and the governments should work, and are in most cases working closely together to ensure this process continues to be as smooth and seamless as possible for the passengers. I don't know, I hope I answered the question, because it was a bit long on this.
And I think if I can add on to that, actually, again, it's another example of the way that Dubai pushes forward with this. That, in fact, last week here in Dubai, there was a very good coming together organised by the Dubai government on future borders, where actually the security issue did bring together airports, airlines, police forces, and how those things work. And so I think there is good movement towards it.
Just a small little thing. Back in the military days, they used to tell us that there is a countermeasure and then a countermeasure. So tomorrow we will spend a lot of money on aircraft tracking systems, but then there are factors who will spend even more money or even bigger effort to counter that as well. So in that way, probably there is a never-ending story. But when we go to the baseline security training of people and their awareness about safety, probably that cost will go a longer way. Thank you.
Thank you. And actually, if we do look at some of that, sorry, there's another point somewhere, was there? Here, with the microphone, please. Could you just put your hand up again clearly so we can just, thank you.
Amr Samaha from the Egyptian Civil Pilot Syndicate. I think 19 cases worldwide of aircraft disappearance. It's a huge number to talk about right now, but that question will be mostly asked to the Director of Aviation Safety for Boeing. Before asking airlines to invest in tracking system, isn't it now too far at 19 incidents of disappearance? Shouldn't have Boeing already had set, or aircraft manufacturers worldwide set a task team of engineers or whatever to actually find a solution or invent some tracking device to overcome such a deficiency before, like Captain Elias said, regulators to enforce it on airlines?
Boeing, should you have been doing more, I think?
Yes, yes, exactly.
In place. I knew you'd get the blame in the end, Chamsou, if we were working towards that.
Well, I believe that aircraft are designed according to specifications that are approved by regulators, and depends on the functions that are expected from the aircraft. So current specifications didn't require special tracking system. There are tracking systems existing that operators use according to their needs, and the new approach of global tracking system was not a requirement, and so there is no specific design associated to that. If tomorrow, as an industry, we come up with a requirement of global tracking system, there will be a solution. But once again, we shouldn't think solution, we shouldn't think technology first. We should think about standards that are performance-based. And once we agreed on standards, then the technology will follow. It's not a technological issue. So I hope I respond to your...
yes, sir, I get that. But what I was asking is, IATA now formed a task force looking for that. ICAO, airlines are looking for solutions. Isn't Boeing and aircraft manufacturers already should have task forces of engineers and scientists or whatever looking forward for such answers to help these organizations and airlines?
As a manufacturer, we have the resource to find solutions to any problem that is raised. And if it's an airline, let's say you are an airline, you want a solution, we can find a solution. The implementation of that solution will depend if it's a specific problem, like if it comes from an airline requirement, that will be some cost associated. If ever that technology can be certified and implemented in the aircraft. When it becomes a standard, then we develop a solution that becomes standard on the airplane. That's
all right, thank you.
And can I just come back on one point I'm going to go through to all of you now, that if we do come up with a tracking system and it's based on electronics as it would be, should the commander still be able to turn it off? Can I start with you?
The answer is no, actually, and the current transponders and aircraft, as we said earlier, they can be switched off, but there are operators who have procedures to control the switching of the transponders. This issue was discussed in the ICAO high-level safety meeting as well, and I believe the new design of the tracking equipment will undergo, the risk analysis to ensure that the system that they're going to opt for has no impact on the operation of the aircraft system while flying. So hopefully the new solutions, you won't have to worry about switching them on or switching them off.
Well, as a pilot, I think that unless there is a solution, it is 100% safe, or let me say very, very safe, the commander has to have the ability to switch it off in case of smoke, for instance. You cannot take this away from the commander because it would mean that there is another impact on safety, some other place. So you don't want to solve this problem and then find yourself in another critical situation. So as a pilot, I think that eventually the pilot has to have the ability to switch it off.
Now, just a switcher question as we're going to finish this now. I think we've seen suggestions that it will be 2020 before this happens. Can it be sooner? Hussein, what's your guess from my answer? When are we going to see tracking on aircraft?
Well, I mean, actually, we have tracking right now. I mean, through the TCAS, through all other systems. Airplanes are being tracked, except that when the pilot or somebody turns off the transponder, which eventually then that stops it. So it's not a matter of 2020. Maybe by 2020, the regulations will be different in the sense that there is no need to turn it off in case of smoke, as the captain has said. I mean, should be a technology that the tracking should remain on all the time from the minute takeoff until landing, and this is something I believe is a must. I mean, I'm not a pilot, and of course I can't really argue with my captain here, but it's really important that aircraft are continuously monitored throughout the flight at all times, and if there are issues that will prevent so because of incidents happening on the ground or off the ground, then the manufacturers need to find a solution for that.
Okay. And Chamsou, finally with you, when do you think we could see this kind of technology rather than what we have here?
Well, at this stage, I think it's a bit premature to talk about what the technology will be. The fact is that the first step is to identify the requirements and to determine, to identify to agree on a standard. And then there will be some operational requirements linked to that standard. For instance, that the commander should not have the opportunity to switch it off or not. That is something that needs to be discussed. And before it is accepted, since we are talking together, there should be the technology should be able to respond to that. So when we come to that stage where there will be a system that is accepted, globally accepted, all these questions would have been debated and found the solutions. And then we go to implementation. So at this stage, I think it's a bit premature to say, should the commander have control. In principle, we could understand that if it's a tracking system and we want it to be effective in some circumstances, we shouldn't link it to the ability of the commander to stop it or not. But is it feasible? Today, we don't have solution to that. That doesn't mean that tomorrow we won't have that solution.
Great. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Please show your appreciation to our panel. Mohammed, Elias, Hussein, and Chamsou.